Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. With less than 2 months until these midterm elections, people all over the country, as we've documented, are mobilizing to protect abortion rights, while Republican politicians across the country are pledging to ban abortion any way they can. In Mississippi, the Republican House Speaker there has said his state, quote, has an opportunity to lead the nation in protecting, promoting, and supporting life. It's a pretty remarkable statement for a number of reasons. Now, it's true, Mississippi has been a leader in the assault on abortion rights in this country. There's no question about that. It was their law, Mississippi's law, and its challenge to Roe v. Wade that ultimately overturned Roe. The state had a trigger law in effect as well, which automatically banned nearly all abortions after Roe was overturned. But to say that Mississippi is a leader in supporting life is just objectively not true. In fact, in many ways, it's the opposite. The state perfectly embodies the stark reality of what conservative governance looks like on the ground, where life is cheap. This is a state that has one of the most, if not the most, potent legacies of racism in the history of this nation. In 1860, right before the start of the Civil War, there were more than 430,000 slaves in Mississippi, comprising 55% of the state's population. And even after the war, the state's government, under Jim Crow, was essentially a white, authoritarian, single-party state. Arguably the most brutal in the entire South, which is saying something. And today, at the state and federal level, the state government is dominated exclusively by white Republicans, with the party holding massive majorities in both the state House and the Senate, the governorship. Both the state senators, Roger Wicker, Sidney Hyde-Smith, are conservative Republicans. The state has consistently elected Republican governors for nearly 2 decades, most recently the current Republican Tate Reeves. Under unified Republican control, there is just no earthly way Mississippi can plausibly be described as, quote, promoting and supporting life. The state has the highest COVID death rate per capita in the country, and in turn, it has the lowest life expectancy in the country at just about 72 years. Mississippi also has the highest infant mortality rate in the entire country. Mississippi has the most gun deaths per capita of any state in the entire country. Mississippi is also the poorest state in the nation. And to be perfectly clear here, none of this is an indictment of the great people who live in that state. Rather, the abject negligence of the Republicans who have been running it for so long. Case in point, much of Jackson, Mississippi, the state's capital, does not currently have drinkable water. You may have seen this story. Jackson residents have been told they have to boil their water. This is in the United States of America in the year 2022. They have to boil their water before it is potable since July. The problem was exacerbated last month when heavy flooding caused a water treatment plant to fail. And due to widespread issues with the water pressure, meaning the water wasn't just not drinkable, you couldn't actually get it up through the pipes, the state was forced to install fancy porta potties at the state capitol building in Jackson so members of the legislature, dominated by Republicans, could use the bathroom there. Thankfully, water pressure has been restored, but the city still lacks clean water, with residents being told to shower with their mouths closed. That's not due to some kind of unforeseen natural disaster, no, rather systematic negligence of a problem that officials, particularly federal officials, warned about years ago. You see, back in 2020, the Environmental Protection Agency warned that the Jackson water system, quote, presented, listen to this, an imminent and substantial endangerment to the health of persons served by the system. While Jackson residents and local leaders, many of whom are Democrats, have been sounding the alarm of this threat for years, Republicans at the state level have not made the capital, whose population is about 83% black, much of a priority. Get this, last year, the city of Jackson asked the state for $47 million to shore up its water and sewage systems. The Republican legislature approved just $3 million. Meanwhile, the state of Mississippi received billions in federal funding from the American Rescue Plan, signed by Joe Biden, passed on a party line vote by Democrats, opposed, of course, by both of its Republican senators. It's about $6 billion came to the state, but $450 million was set aside by the legislature for water infrastructure. But the legislature demanded that cities match the funds, which Jackson couldn't afford to do. Democratic Congressman Benny Thompson of Mississippi, who represents part of Jackson, is the state's only Democrat in Congress, lays the blame firmly with Republicans.
What we have is a reluctant office of governor who decided that for whatever reason, Jackson would be treated differently. That's unfortunate. That was not the intent of the legislation.
Why do you think Jackson is being treated differently?
Well, every other elected government around Jackson is Republican. Jackson is the only Democratic city that's surrounded by Republican elected suburban officials. They have been taken care of. The majority of the money that we've sent from Washington at this point have gone to the suburbs, and the inner city, the capital city, is being left out.
Okay, this is important because we're going to come back to this. This will be the establishment of the theme. Federal money coming to Mississippi for the needs of some of Mississippi's poorest, most marginalized members, right, of the state, and then being diverted away to them to affluent white communities. Okay, now the Biden infrastructure plan is going to send even more federal money to Mississippi, but that rollout takes a very long time, and there's no guarantee state Republicans will use that any more efficiently than they have in the past.